Welcome, everybody, to the MNCPPC Department of Parks and Recreation Virtual Nutrition Workshop. Get ready to experience a fun, interactive, and educational session with a certified nutritionist. In this session, you will discover ways to make healthier choices for you and your family. Be sure to share what you learned during this session with a friend or family member. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us for this virtual nutrition workshop. My name is Delaney Dold, and I'm a health and wellness assistant with the Department of Parks and Recreation. Before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping items. You should see a microphone icon at the bottom of your screen, like you see here on this screen. You will need to click this icon to mute yourself. We ask that you remain muted to limit any distractions during the program. Next, I want to draw your attention to the camera icon. You will use this to turn your camera on and off. Please be mindful that when your camera is on, all participants joining this evening will be able to see your screen. You have the option to keep your camera on or turn it off, but remember that we want to minimize distractions throughout the program and keep the focus on the presentation being provided. The last icon that I want to tell you about is the chat icon. This will allow you to ask questions throughout our program. To type a question, you will click on the icon like you see on the screen here to bring up a chat box, and it should take you to what you see next. Once you see the chat box, as you see here on the screen, there will be a space for you to type in a question or a comment. Hit enter and we'll see your question or comment on the screen. Please ask your questions or share comments throughout the program. We're looking forward to a great discussion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our trained professional for the evening. Kristen McGill is a registered dietitian, licensed dietitian nutritionist, and a certified specialist in obesity and weight management. She received her bachelor's in nutritional sciences at Penn State University and went on to do her dietetic internship through Penn State as well. She obtained her master's of science in food and nutrition education from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Her career paths have included working as a clinical dietitian, long-term care, bariatrics, and now retail. Kristen is always on the hunt for a food adventure, whether it be a new restaurant or a new type of cuisine to try. In her spare time, she enjoys painting, drawing, and soaking up everything the DC scenery has to offer. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kristen for our program this evening.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Let me just pull up my slides here. All right. Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for giving up some of your time to learn a little bit more about how we can spice things up a little bit. I'm glad that you figured out, well, you've been instructed how the chat box function operates. So I am a huge chat box person. I encourage interaction with each other. I think how we'll do this is totally, you guys can feed off of each other, bounce back ideas. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw that in the chat box. But in order to get through all the material, throw your question in the chat, and then we'll have some time at the end to kind of go over any questions that you have. But I'm probably going to be encouraging you to throw some comments in the chat box just to get some good ideas for you. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about how we can spice things up. So when you think about where we were a year ago, we were smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. We're definitely not out of it yet, although things are looking up. But, we saw this whole movement of people cooking in the kitchen. I mean, we kind of had no choice. So yeah, people were brushing up their culinary skills. People were doing baking. Then we saw this social media movement too. People were showcasing everything that they were making. And maybe that was some of you. So you can go ahead and throw that in the chat if you were somebody where you found yourself in the kitchen a lot more, maybe than you'd rather prefer. But anyway, so with that being said, people did start to experiment a little bit more with the spices. Maybe they're ready to challenge themselves and try something different. So it's actually pretty cool to know that, it wasn't just a trend, but it did spark this interest in how can we use spices a lot more. So, and maybe you have some pantry staples already that you just know, hey, I'm always cooking with this kind of spice because I just love it so much. I know I have my personal favorites, but yeah, I had to laugh because, we go back a year ago and man, man, we were kind of forced to be in the kitchen no matter what. So let's just go over and talk about, ways we can spice up our dishes, but also the health benefits that they offer, because they are quite a few. All right, so first I want to cover this data graph here. So whether we tune into a talk show or we pick up the newspaper, health benefits and just the interest in nutrition is just promoted almost daily. So it's kind of nice that it's a big trend. I mean, people should be caring about their health and wellness more so now than ever, just because chronic disease is an ever increasing prevalence in our country. But if you look here at the survey, you don't have to look at every single graph because it might be a little bit hard to see on the screen. But what you're seeing is that this survey done by Food Marketing Institute says that taste continues to trump nutrition as an important factor in consumer selection and purchases. So that just means this, that just goes to show that people, they want healthy food, but they want it to taste good too. In fact, that's the driving force behind their purchasing decisions, among other things too. So just found that really fascinating and wanted to share that with you all. But here's the good news. You can have it both ways. You can have those spices, you can have those herbs that really amplify the taste, and you can have nutrition with it. It's just how you mix and match together, which I hope some of you get some really good ideas by the end of our session. So like I said, you can have your cake and you can eat it too, no pun intended. Okay, so let's just look at the modern usage of spice that's going on in the world today. So just to kind of give you some context here, 2 million tons of spices are produced annually, but look at those numbers, 2 billion in sales occur. So man, the production, the sales and all that, there's definitely a high demand for it. So India is the largest producer of, the world's spices, followed by China, Indonesia, and Pakistan. Now, the US does play a role in this because this is the largest market for spices and it continues to rise. So the reason for this growth stem comes from the fact that, we are diversifying our populations. We have good representation, not everywhere, but, in heavy metropolitan areas, we've got adequate representation of different cultures. And, food is a staple in, traditional cultures and cuisines. So it's kind of nice to see that, yes, this is infiltrating, not only in just, homes all across our country, but also in restaurants. So we're starting to see more variety there, which is really great. There's also an increased demand for culture-specific herbs and spices, which just means there's increased availability because of that. And then there's just an increasing popularity of it. I know sometimes we tend to blame the millennials on certain movements, but actually this whole interest in flavors and new food trends and just expanding your flavor profile was really driven by the millennial movement. So I had to laugh because and I look back at my hometown even, where I grew up, and we just had standard fast food restaurants. And, since I've been out a couple decades, man, it's just exploded with all kinds of different restaurants, just so much more variety. So it's kind of nice to know that, yeah, even in a small town that I grew up, it's really, kind of expanded. And so and here in the DMV, we don't have a shortage of that at all. We got so many options. So I think I make this joke that I landed in the right place for all those food varieties out there. So anyway, the other thing is, to be on the lookout is that it's trendy. It's a trendy thing to use spices for many different reasons. So we're just kind of up on par with the trends. Now, the USDA estimates that the average American consumes 3.3 pounds of spices annually. But that more than a quarter of that is coming from black and white pepper and mustard seed, which is used to, obviously prepare mustard. So anyway, just saying that we could probably afford to expand a little more of our variety with that data. All right, so why do we want to use our herbs and spices? I think it's pretty much a given, but throughout the world, spices and herbs are used largely to just improve the flavor and provide, that wonderful taste, that wonderful aroma. Think about everything that spices do for a dish. It can literally take some of the most bland items or bland ingredients and just, man, just a multiplier, just make it into something just so delicious and tasty. So that's essentially the purpose that they serve. They transform meals, they add got so many ranges of flavors, from a hint of sweetness to maybe a kick of heat. And again, hopefully I'm getting some of your thoughts going where you're thinking about what are your favorite herbs. I have so many, and spices, herbs and spices. And I do apologize. I'm just looking at my phone to see if there is any chat box activity. And like I said, don't be shy. Throw some stuff in the chat if you feel like sharing. But anyway, they also give beautiful aromas, which is often that first determining factor of whether we want to eat a meal or not. So think about, if you're the chef in the house, or maybe you have a partner who does most of the cooking, think about what it's like when you walk in the kitchen. That smells delicious. One of my favorite things to cook together, garlic and onions. Man, nothing beats the smell of those two together. It's just a perfect harmony. So anyway, that's obviously an incentivized reason to want to cook with that. They also they help appear, goodness gracious, they help improve the appearance, there we go, of making food a little more brighter, a little more appealing. And along with culinary and seasoning purposes, herbs and spices are also an important part of a heart healthy diet, or just a healthy diet in general. So studies have actually broken it down to see, different herbs, different spices have these types of properties that can help prevent X, Y, and Z chronic diseases. But as a whole, the more that you're cooking with these herbs and spices, you're really helping to reduce your risk of conditions like cancer and diabetes and heart disease. So, if you're somebody where you do this on the regular, great, keep that up. But if you're somebody like me where, yeah, maybe you could do a little bit better, it's always good, always good to stay inspired. So if you're wondering, well, what exactly is it about herbs and spices that make them so potent? How do they help combat chronic disease? So both of them are going to be high in antioxidants and polyphenols, which are natural plant substances that protect our cells from free radical oxidative stress. And on a side note, we come into contact with free radicals every single day, whether we like it or not. So it's really exposure in the environment that we live in. So harmful UV rays, or too much sun exposure can actually cause free radical oxidative stress, pollution, smog. Think about this area. It's a very heavy metropolitan area. I think we did see a little reprieve with the pandemic and all that pollution, but I think it's starting back up again. In fact, I heard that traffic was, I think I read a headline, traffic's even worse now after the pandemic. I don't know how that makes sense, but either way, all that pollution, first and secondhand smoke. So, all of that we come into contact with every day, and long-term chronic exposure, not enough antioxidants in our diet can increase our risk for chronic disease. So these are our natural food fighters. In fact, they are the most potent ones out there. So all good things come from spices and herbs. The other thing is that they can reduce our salt, fat, and sugar intake. I know they taste delicious, and sometimes all in one bite. But actually, they can, help preserve the integrity or the flavor of the dish, but it's also helping to minimize calories. You're not getting calories from fat, you're not getting extra calories from sugar. Sodium doesn't really contribute to calories necessarily, unlike how it contributes to, blood pressure, high blood pressure. So we want to keep that in check. But anyway, all that to say that you're not sacrificing flavor, but you are cutting down on the calories, which is good, and that can help prevent weight gain. And we know with, what the research is showing out there, that as our weight goes up, so does our risk for chronic disease. Then you couple in the fact that we've got, free radical oxidative stress. So yeah, like I said, we need all the help we can get from these wonderful herbs and spices here. All right, so if you want, you're more than welcome to take a little screenshot with your phone. I like to talk about this because, I just talked in the previous slide about how herbs and spices are chock full of antioxidants. There's actually a chart that measures the antioxidant rankers, the heaviest hitters on this chart. It might be a little bit hard to see, so like I said, you might want to take a screenshot and then zoom in a little bit. I think this is the best I can do with my screen share. But anyway, so antioxidant values are expressed using the ORAC chart. It stands for oxygen radical absorbance capacity, and this is measured in units. So it's basically a unit measure for the antioxidant content. And this was originally developed by the National Institute on Aging at the National Institute of Health. So NIA, NIH has their hands on this. So basically, you know that it is scientifically supported. So that's pretty cool. So I won't go through every single one of those, but if you look and see that spices are the ones in red. So if you kind of look at the left-hand side, that's kind of, I couldn't get the chart to be, completely lengthwise, so we had to split it up. But the one on the left that you see, cinnamon is that chart topper that you see there. There's nothing higher than cinnamon. So it's kind of off the chain, as I say, with its auric value. If you're somebody that you love cloves, cloves is falling closely behind. If you love oregano, so if you're looking at the little red bars there, those are the spices alone. And if you notice, some of them are actually outranking fruits and vegetables. Now, again, we don't want to undermine the importance of getting in our fruits and veggies. All of that should be included, but it is just nice to know that, a little bit packs a heavy punch. So cinnamon is actually one of my favorite spices. It does give me really bad heartburn, but it's okay. That's what antacids are for. But no, I just love cinnamon. I love how it brightens a dish. And all you need, if you see there on that chart, is just a teaspoon. And that's so easy to sneak in. You can put some in your oatmeal in the morning. You can put some in your coffee. Actually, I love cinnamon in my coffee. I even put in my coffee grounds the night before. So when it brews, I've got some cinnamon in my coffee. I just think it's absolutely delicious that way. Overnight oats, hot oats, you can put it in smoothies, yogurt, parfaits. There's a lot of ways that you can sneak cinnamon. Oh, I forgot to mention too, certain soups and stews can actually call for cinnamon. It just gives it such an earthy, just wonderful spice to it. So that's my whole, spiel about cinnamon. I don't know if other people out there love cinnamon as much as I do, but go ahead and throw it in the chat if you see any of your favorite spices and just how they rank. But all of these are really, really potent. So that's kind of good to know. Like I said, a little bit goes a long way to reap those antioxidant benefits. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, so this next slide is a little bit longer because I am going to break down each spice, and I'm going to talk to you about, the science behind it, what kind of research they're doing. Oh, somebody says ginger is my favorite. Oh, ginger is really good too. Can't forget about ginger. I do love that too. So thanks for sharing that too. And everybody else can chime in too with what your favorite spice or your favorite herb is. I still have tons of herbs that I'm really jazzed about. But okay, so bear with me on this slide. In fact, I would just say, sit back, relax, keep your ears perked up for, in the event that I mention one of your favorites and what the research or what the science is trying to link the two. But I also want to tread these waters very carefully because even though there's research, it's not a cure-all. So let's just keep that in mind. So, a good example is the chromium in cinnamon. I don't think that that's mentioned on this slide, but chromium is in cinnamon that can actually help support better blood sugar control. But that does not mean that we shouldn't take our diabetes medications or we should skip out on exercise or we can eat all the carbs. I'm just showing that it's kind of cool to know that it has that potential role, or it helps support better blood sugar control. So I just want to get out there in front of it and let you know that, research is so fascinating, but we got to have balance. We got to have, all inclusive exercise, diet, sleeping well, hydrating, all that good stuff. Okay, so spice companies like McCormick Spice know all about the benefits of these antioxidants. But this is kind of cool because, their whole mission is just to support ongoing scientific research and disseminate information on the specific health benefits of these herbs and spices. So this institute is led by nutrition scientists. It's guided by a scientific advisory council, which consists of, internationally renowned scientists and health professionals. So like I said, these are the big wigs here, kind of, doing all this wonderful research into these wonderful spices. So I'm just going to kind of share a little bit about what they're finding with the connection. So it's, like I said, keep some of your favorite spices and herbs in the back of your mind. You don't need to write this down because I don't have a slide to correspond with it, but I think it's kind of cool just to kind of hear what is the science showing? What are some links that might be actually driven back to some of our favorite herbs and spices? So without further ado, let's just start with oregano. I don't know if I have any oregano lovers out there. I definitely love it in Italian dishes. I do have a hint of Italian in my heritage, so of course I'm always going to love some good old pasta sauce. But anyway, so oregano has been used to treat respiratory tract disorders, GI disorders, menstrual cramps, urinary tract disorders, and this herb has also been applied to topical skin or topically just to treat a number of skin conditions such as acne and dandruff. We got some turmeric lovers out there, or we have a turmeric lover. So I believe on this slide there's some research, cool new research that they're finding with this. Black pepper. I'm also a big black pepper person. This is one of the most sought after and expensive spices during the spice trade era, years and years and years, many millennial ago, I guess is the term. But yeah, with that whole spice trade, everybody wanted black pepper. But here's the cool thing that it does. It can actually help lower blood pressure, blood lipids, including cholesterol. So it actually can help inhibit that. Yeah, somebody said, I didn't know that oregano could help so much. Yeah, it gets better. So it only goes up from here. So yeah, if you love black pepper, just know it can actually help with lowering blood cholesterol. How cool. I don't know how people feel about fennel. I am not a fennel lover, but I can tolerate it when it's very disguised. It's not my favorite, but either way, listen to all this research that's been done on fennel. They found that it can actually be used for a variety of digestive problems, including heartburn, intestinal gas, bloating, if you have loss of appetite or colic in infants. Again, I don't know how you get an infant to take fennel, but I think that's kind of interesting. It's also just like oregano has been used for upper respiratory tract infections, coughs, bronchitis, cholera, backaches, bedwetting, visual problems. And I'm telling you, I'm not making this stuff up. This is just what the research has been linking. And again, remember what I said, it's not a cure-all. So, if somebody's got bronchitis, that doesn't mean that you're just taking a bunch of fennel and hoping, crossing your fingers, hoping for the best. It doesn't always work that way. But again, this is, stuff that can help support, a healthier respiratory tract. All right. Some women in the past have even used fennel to increase breast milk flow and the ease of birthing process. I had no idea. And also increasing sex drive. So clearly it's got some kind of role in reproductive health. So anyway, I'm kind of fascinated by that because who would have thought? Okay, rosemary. I don't know if I have any rosemary lovers out there. This is very anti-inflammatory. And so that's actually pretty cool. It can help improve immune function, help with blood circulation, also reduce the severity of asthma attacks. It's also been used as aromatherapy. It might even be linked to help enhance memory, cognition. So I don't know if I have any rosemary lovers out there, but there's some cool new findings that they're trying to identify or they've linked with these spices. Now ginger, I know somebody said they love ginger. It says unknown user on my end, so otherwise I'd address you. But yes, so ginger is a favorite. So listen to everything that ginger does. It's effective at preventing symptoms of motion sickness and seasickness, which actually speaks to me because, if you've ever had that, household remedy growing up, you have an upset stomach, have some ginger ale. Yeah, someone's getting excited out there. But yeah, so if you've ever had an upset stomach, there is a reason why ginger has often been prescribed because it can actually help reduce nausea and vomiting, especially during pregnancy too. I thought that was kind of interesting. Sometimes you have to be careful with the medication, how it doesn't conflict with, proper fetal growth and development. So anyway, the other thing too, helps with nausea. Yes. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, I think that's really cool. But it also has anti-inflammatory fighting properties. So it has a substance called gingerol, not ginger ale, gingerol, OL, which can actually help reduce pain and improve function with people who have arthritis. So how cool is that? All right, so moving on, we have coriander. So I'm going to be pretty brief with this because, like I said, we got some other good stuff to cover. But again, if your ears perk up and you're hearing your favorite spice, just hang tight and listen to, some of the cool research that's been done. So the seeds have been used for thousands of years as a digestive aid, and it can help some people with IBS, that irritable bowel syndrome. Oops, sorry, I moved back to my slides too quickly. anyway. Sorry, and I lost my place here. Let me see real fast. Okay. So it can actually help with IBS. It can calm intestinal spasms, which is really interesting. Preliminary studies in animals support the use as an anti-anxiety herb. That's really interesting. Some essential oils are made from coriander. And I don't know if anybody is an essential oil user out there. I actually was blown away. I used to think they were a gimmick. I'm not going to lie. And I suffer from migraine headaches. And man, I put some of that stuff on. I don't know if it had coriander in it or not. But I'm not kidding you. My migraine went away and I was like freaked out. I was shook because, oh yeah, somebody else just got into essential oils. Yeah, I thought I'd be the last person on the planet to get into it. But my mom, she suffers from migraines too. And she was like, you got to try this. Anyway, I'm hooked now. I could not believe it. So anyway, I was just saying that coriander has actually been used as part of, some essential oils. And I know there's different, types of oils for different health remedies, but coriander, especially for the digestive aid, it actually can fight certain types of bacteria like E. coli, salmonella. Again, we want to be safe with our food. Okay. We want to make sure. Oh, somebody said that it helps your essential oils with sleep. That's really cool. Again, there's something out there for every remedy that you might need. But yeah, speaking of remedies, be safe with your food, foodborne illnesses and stuff like that, make sure that, yeah, we're practicing those HACCP guidelines, but we're not, crossing our fingers, like I said, and hoping that, some of these spices will help cure all. It doesn't always work like that. So, oh, somebody's asking if I have slides that I can share with this info. Yes, I would be happy to share because I'm just doing like a big brain dump, and I know it's probably a lot for everyone to remember. So yes, I would be more than happy to share slides, but I would just kindly ask that we just keep it within this community. I mean, I don't think anyone would ever post to Facebook, but you never know. So yes, not to insult anybody or think like, why would she think that we would do that? I just have to be cover my bases. So anyway, we'll keep it within our little group here, but I would be more than happy. I have to send a follow-up email anyway. So I will attach our deck and then this can go out. And so you can kind of keep tabs on this. Cause like I said, I'm doing a total brain dump on you all. Okay. Turmeric. I'm sorry. I promise you I'm going to move on from this slide. There's a lot more color, a lot more stuff to see. So I'm just going to skim through, but it is an herb from the ginger family. It gives it that beautiful color, especially in curries. It's a very, very powerful antioxidant. We see that a lot in Chinese and Asian, Indian dishes, but it's also been used for medicinal purposes. I'm not sure what, but science has proven that it actually can enhance immune function. Makes sense because it's a powerful antioxidant. So it's going to enhance our immunity, can help improve digestion. And yes, so I'm trying to think, just kind of skip over some of this stuff that's really detailed. Oh, cayenne. I want to talk about cayenne pepper. I don't know if I have any heat lovers out there. I am a heat fanatic, man. I want everything spicy. Probably too much. Anyway, so what's so cool about cayenne peppers, it has something called capsaicin. It's an oily compound, and it's actually an active ingredient in many prescription and over-the-counter creams and ointments and patches to help treat muscle pain or just pain in general, because it's so anti-inflammatory. So that's actually pretty cool. Again, if you need some Tylenol, you need some Advil, then yes, you might want to take that if you got like a pounding migraine like what I get. But anyway, I do think it's kind of cool that, yeah, that capsaicin in there is actually kind of like an analgesic. Analgesic. So it helps numb, helps fight some pain and everything. Okay, I'm going to move on just because, oh yeah, I talked about cinnamon with that, I mentioned, I believe, yes, that chromium can help actually with blood sugar control. Other than that, I think I'm just going to move on. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Somebody said we're going to send this information out later on tonight. So hang tight. All this good information is coming your way. All right. So, all right, so I'm going to move on because like I said, we could spend probably too much time on that slide here. So let's just look and see, the flavor profiles that so many spices offer when they come together. And maybe some of these speak to you. Like, for example, I have a friend where she just loves any Southwestern, flavors that come together, that cumin, the garlic, she's really into that. I don't know if anyone's really into the Asian cuisine or Mediterranean, but what's kind of nice is that some of us, if we're familiar with these types of, cultural dietary patterns or flavor profiles, we kind of know what to expect. Like, for example, when I hear Asian cuisine, I already know I'm probably going to get hints of ginger and garlic, of course, and that kind of makes sense. Or Mediterranean, garlic, oregano, some of the basil, so on and so forth. So again, if some of these like ethnic or these cultural cuisines stick out to you, just take note. It's kind of nice to know, like, this is kind of where they originate. So all around the world, we can start with some basic ingredients, but I think what's so cool is what makes the final dish. Like, chicken is chicken. But of course, if you add so many flavors, you can have Moroccan chicken, or you can have, Thai chicken. You can have so many different flavors based on what, the flavor enhancers are being added to the dish. So that's just something that's kind of cool. So I won't go into this slide in too much detail. But like I said, if oh yeah, Indian food is there. I love Indian food. It's like one of my favorites out there. So I don't cook with Indian food just because I feel like I would botch it. So I usually get takeout, but I know that, if you have all these spices on hand, it's very easy to replicate it at home. But like I said, I don't trust myself in the kitchen with Indian food. But anyway, so like I said, the whole point of this is that, like, basic ingredients can come together, but what differentiates them and their flavor profiles is all the spices and herbs that are being used. So it's pretty cool. All right, so the most frequent question that I get is, what is the difference between the two, the spices or the herbs? So let me break this down for you. So herbs are leaves of low-growing shrubs, and they can either be fresh or they can be dried. And then dried forms can actually be whole or crushed or ground. So some examples of herbs are going to be parsley, chives, marjoram, thyme, basil. Basil is one of my favorites. Caraway, dill, oregano, rosemary, savory, sage, and celery leaves. That's a lot. So again, I'm not expecting anyone to remember that, but just keep your ears perked up if I'm mentioning some of your favorites. Okay, now spices come from the bark or root or buds or seeds or even berries or fruit from tropical plants and trees. So they're either sold whole or ground into a powder. So spices that come from a bark would be things like cinnamon. Roots would be ginger, makes sense. Ginger root, onions, garlic, those are root vegetables. We have buds like cloves and saffron. They come from a bud of a plant. And then we have seeds like yellow mustard and poppy seeds and sesame seeds. So some of this stuff is making sense. Berries, actually, this is where black pepper comes from. I don't know what kind of berry. It's probably some type of species I'm not even like sure of off the top of my head. And then you actually have fruit that can still yield spices like allspice and paprika, which is pretty cool. Sometimes plants can come from the same, or sorry, sometimes herbs and spices can come from the same plant, like cilantro. I don't know if anybody knew this about cilantro. I actually didn't know this, that, cilantro leaves, we know what those are like. And then you have the coriander seeds. It comes from the same plant. So it's kind of cool, but they're not the same. So when we cook with cilantro, we're going to get a different flavor profile. When we cook with coriander, we're also going to get something a lot different too. Coriander is a lot more earthy. So I would not use cilantro or coriander in place of cilantro. So, but how cool is that? The same plant, two different flavor profiles, but yeah, and two different purposes. So all right, so what about fresh? What about dried? So as a rule, you should be adding your fresh herbs near the end of cooking or just before serving. And that's because prolonged heating can cause the flavor or the aroma to lose. So it's not going to have that same effect. Delicate or fresh herbs, so think about basil and chives, cilantro and dill. These should be added about a minute or two before the end of your cooking or just sprinkled, kind of like a garnish. I love doing that with fresh parsley, and it really does make the dish pop in terms of the appearance, makes it definitely more enticing. Less delicate are fresh herbs like dill seeds and rosemary, tarragon, and thyme. They can also be added about the last 20 minutes of cooking just because they're a little more sturdy. They're not so fragile. All right, well, let's talk about dried spices. So whole dried spices and herbs, such as whole allspice and bay leaves. So these are different. They release flavors slower than stuff that's crumbled or ground. And so these are ideal for dishes that take much longer to cook. So think about soups or think about stews. I absolutely love anything that calls for a bay leaf. Really does help. But just a warning, it's very important to remove the bay leaf at the end of cooking. I always thought it was just because, yeah, nobody wants to bite into an entire leaf unexpectedly, but they can actually be a choking hazard, especially for, little ones. And also sometimes those leaves, I don't know if anyone's touched a bay leaf, they're really stiff, not sharp. They're not like jagged, but it can be a little bit sharp. So if you do swallow it, it might actually, cause a little throat discomfort, might feel like you scraped your throat. So anyway, there's a reason why they tell you to remove the bay leaf. Okay, so ground dried spices and herbs, they release their flavor very quickly. So, even if you're grinding spices on the spot, like think about ground pepper versus those peppercorns that you can grind right there on the spot, they actually do have a little bit more of a more potent flavor. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, pepper, having some pepper to a dish is better than no pepper. So, but there's a reason why, if you're wondering, how come you have that option of buying ground pepper at the store versus stuff that you grind on the spot? It's just because when you grind it right then and there, it just does have a little more of a stronger flavor, more noticeable, I guess. Okay, how about uncooked foods? So think about stuff that still needs a lot of flavor to it, like potato salad, pasta salads. So you can add both fresh and dried spices, but that's something that you would need to wait several hours for it to let those flavors blend together. And honestly, I don't think any truer words have been spoken, because my mom's potato salad is out of this world. And I've had a bite right when it's like, she's done. I can't wait. I need a bite of that potato salad. It just doesn't taste the same. But give it several hours and those wonderful flavors come together, and that's the potato salad that I know and love so well. So it just goes to show that certain recipes need some time for those flavors to marry together. All right, other questions are, which forms, like fresh or dried, are they interchangeable? So for example, if you have a recipe that calls for, fresh parsley, but you only have dried, can you use it? And sometimes I don't have a straightforward answer because it can be complicated. Of course, everything's complicated these days. But a general rule of thumb is if you're swapping dried for fresh herbs, is just to use a third of the amount that the recipe calls for. So I'll break this down for you. So let's say, for instance, a recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary, but you don't have fresh rosemary, you have dried. A third of that is going to be 1 teaspoon of dried, because there's 3 teaspoons in 1 tablespoon. So a third of that, that's where you get the 1. The reverse is also true. So let's say, for instance, a recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of dried parsley. We're just picking on parsley now. You would double, or no, you would triple that, because it's a third. So actually, if you're converting dried to fresh, you would then just kind of multiply that by 3 times. And so you would get your 1 tablespoon of fresh. Honestly, I usually choose recipes where I can use them in, like, I have this one cookbook that will say use this amount for dried, this amount for fresh. It's so much easier. I don't like to do any conversions in my head. So anyway, but that's a general rule of thumb. Again, try to follow the recipe as much as you can, because when it comes to herbs and spices, that can make or break a dish. So I really tell people, don't play around with, going overboard or not flavoring enough, because, there's a reason the recipe is as such. You can tweak as long as you get familiar enough with the recipe, maybe adding an extra pinch here and there. But like I said, I don't play around with spices, because it can ruin a dish if you're not following correctly. And if anyone's had that experience, you can go ahead and throw that in the chat box, because we've all been there. You're not alone. Okay, so there's this humorist out there. Her name is Irma Bombeck. She's been quoted saying, "Once you get a spice in your home, you have it forever. Women never throw out spices. The Egyptians were buried with their spices." I actually think that's really funny, because that speaks to me. And I don't know if anybody out there in the audience has identified with that. But yeah, herbs and spices, or well, definitely the dried, will sit in my shelf, and I have no idea when I bought them, how long they've been there. So let me just kind of break this down for you. While there's not necessarily an expiration date, sometimes, it's just not going to have the same flavor profile. So what you want to look for, or if you're trying to determine, okay, should I throw this out? Should I keep it? First, you want to look for color, vibrant color. Now, as time goes on, it's going to fade. So if that color is fading, then more than likely the flavor has also faded too. Not like it's bad, not like you can't still use it. It's just not going to be as pungent and noticeable. The aroma, so you can kind of smell it, anything that's a rub or it's crushed, or you do that in your hand. If it's very weak, you don't really get a whole lot of the aromatic qualities of whatever you're examining, then it's probably time to replace it. A good rule of thumb is try to keep your dried spices for at least a year. Now, if you want to get really, really technical, dried herbs or ground spices can actually be kept for up to a year. And then whole spices can actually be kept up for about 2 years. But you can see there on the slide, it's very vague, less than 3 years, less than 4 years. So yeah, I typically just go off of color. I go off the aroma. And I did cook with a spice that I just knew I was like, this has got to go. It just wasn't as flavorful as I've known it to be. So anyway, like I said, it's not going to be harmful for you, but you want to make your dish, what it's worth and do it justice. Use fresh spices when you can. Okay. I think that's all I wanted to say. Yes. All right. About that. And if anybody has questions, you can go ahead and throw it in the chat, but we will have some time at the end. Oh, okay. Somebody had said, is it true we should keep spices that are red in the refrigerator? Actually, good question. I had not heard that. That's a great, and I don't know if anybody else in the chat has heard that too. You're more than welcome to chime in because I'm sorry, I don't think I have a good answer for you. I think you want to store spices basically usually however you find it in the store is how you want to store it at your house. So for example, spices are in the center aisles. They're not in the refrigerated section. So if you buy something, even if it's red like cayenne or cinnamon kind of has a little reddish tint to it, that's how you'd want to store it. That's what I usually go off of in the store, in the grocery store, because any kind of improper storage would cause a violation and fines and stuff like that. So not like it would be harmful, but I also question refrigerators because when you close that refrigerator door, it's dark and it's also cold. I don't know what a dark and damp and cold environment would do for a spice, but I'd imagine it probably isn't great. I mean, I guess you could say the same for a pantry, dark, dry pantry. I don't know. But no, that's a really great question. I haven't heard much about that. But thanks for throwing that in the chat. Maybe somebody else can speak to it when we have a few minutes for Q&A. All right, great questions. Thanks for participating in that. Okay, so fresh herbs. This is actually kind of a tricky question because if you've ever stored them, you feel like you got to beat the clock before they go bad. I buy a bunch of cilantro and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to use this up in time. So I just have some tips for you. So if something falls into the tender herb category, so it's kind of like what you see there, like the flat leaf parsley or the cilantro. There's gonna be other varieties like basil and mint and dill. So these are all the tender herbs. So you want to keep them in a refrigerator. Kind of like you would in a pot of flowers or like a bouquet of flowers. So put them in a little bit of water or a jar of water, and you can change out that water every couple of days. Then you also have hardier, like the texture hard, like surface hardier herbs that can just hang out by themselves in the refrigerator, or you can put them in a jar. And I'll tell you what the difference is between these soft versus hardy. I just like a weird, if I say hearty too fast, it sounds like hearty, like a hearty stew or, hearty flavors. But anyway, I'm talking about texture. Okay, so what you could do is you can seal a jar or you can put them in the jar and have them kind of hanging over the edge, but put like a plastic bag over them and then a rubber band. So they're still kind of breathing, but they're not completely exposed to the elements in your refrigerator, but they're more preserved that way. I don't know if that's making any sense. I'm happy to kind of explain it in more detail. But think about herbs that have a hardier or more wooden stem that you don't want to eat those stems. So rosemary is a good example. Thyme, love thyme, but you don't want to eat those stems. They're very tough. Sage is the same way. So the best way to store them is to wrap them up in a damp paper towel, or you can kind of, like I said, let them hang out in whatever container you bought them in. But yes, so you could also make a little like herb burrito where you wrap them in a damp paper cloth or paper towel and then wrap them in a plastic bag. So it's a lot of work if you ask me, but yeah, I mean, if you don't want to waste your herbs, it's always good to just know how to properly store them. Oh, and here's the other thing I was going to say, that if you are properly storing your herbs, they can actually last several weeks in the refrigerator. I did not know that. So, parsley and dill and cilantro and mint and tarragon, the stuff that has those like soft, tender leaves, they can last anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks as long as you're storing them properly. And then with those hard herbs, like the ones with the hard stems, rosemary, oregano, thyme, and sage, those can actually be stored about the same time, about 1 to 3 weeks, if you're storing them properly. So Another question I get is, can I throw herbs in the freezer? You probably, for the tender herbs, you might want to do a little more to keep them fresh. Like for example, basil might be better, coupled with like some tablespoons of canola or olive oil, and then you can put them in ice cube trays and then freeze them. Because if you've ever frozen basil, it can turn black, and that color is a little off-putting. I know it is for me. So yeah, sometimes I either try to use up my basil ASAP, but what this recommendation is saying is, oh yeah, somebody just learned the paper towel tip. Yeah, it is really, yeah, it is a game changer. I'm glad you said that because yeah, once you know how to store it properly, you're like, oh, this is so much better than, feeling guilty when I throw fresh produce away and stuff like that. I feel that way all the time. I'm like, oh, I got to get better with my storage techniques here. Okay, so what you could do, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm lost my talking points here. So what you could do is you could put chopped herbs. So you can chop them all in advance and put them in a freezer bag and just add water or oil. Squeeze out as much water as you can, like lay it flat. And then your herbs can actually last much longer in the freezer for several months and they're not slimy. All of this is really, oh, so someone's saying chives in the freezer are great. That's good to know. I didn't know that about chives. I mean, again, I'm always hesitant to like put something in the freezer just because I feel like it degrades the color. But again, how you prepare it and get it ready for that is all kind of fascinating and everything. Okay, so we are running out of time. So let me just be pretty brief with this. I think when it comes to, meats and poultry and seafood, you're more than welcome to take a screenshot if you want. So pull out your phones, take a picture in case you're looking for new fun flavors to match with, excuse me, poultry and stuff. Like for example, seafood and lemon is just like a perfect medley together. I don't think it's mentioned there on that. Well, lemon isn't an herb or spice, but seafood and dill goes really, really well. I wouldn't match seafood with, or I'm sorry, dill with like beef. I'm not saying it can't be done, but there's just certain things that are just not quite the same. So anyway, lamb and mint, I think that's kind of interesting, an interesting flavor combination. I've actually only had that once in my life. It was a little bit strange for me to, get used to because I've never had it. And I've never had it since. So, but it's kind of nice to appreciate, the qualities of the meat with, the flavors that you're pairing it with. So for time's sake, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but make sure that without whatever cut of meat you're cooking with, spices and herbs can actually serve as a tenderizer. Not only just that, but like a flavor enhancer. So keep that in mind. That if you're having a really tough cut of meat, it's always good to marinate it, let those flavors blend and soak into the meat. While spices and herbs don't take the place of a tenderizer like an acid would, it just all helps, again, get those flavors deep into that meat, make it really flavorful and delicious. Here's something else you can also take a quick screenshot with, with vegetables, because there is this running joke that, some people think that vegetables are boring. And one of our nutritionists on our team, she actually retweeted somebody's comment that said, your vegetables aren't boring, you are boring, which I thought was funny. They weren't telling that to Jillian, our coworker. They were just saying it as a general statement, like vegetables aren't boring, you're just boring because you don't know what to do with them. So anyway, I had to laugh. I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, so you can do tons of flavor, combinations with some of your favorite vegetables. So like I said, for time's sake, or if you want to hang on for this follow-up slides, this will come later, but it's just nice to have this on hand, what pairs really well with what. So anyway, like I said, for time saver, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. The other thing too I want to talk about is just ways that you're saving a lot of calories and you're just making healthier swaps when you are cooking with herbs and spices. So let's just look real fast. When it comes to sugar, and there's sugar in everything these days. Ketchup has sugar, barbecue sauce has sugar. Again, I love those condiments. I'm not going to give them up, but it's just kind of surprising that, sugar finds its way into so many different things. But the dietary guidelines say that we should be getting less than 10% of our calories per day from added sugar. So what that looks like, it's about 6 teaspoons or 25 grams of sugar. So the best way I can describe it is if you can all picture a can of Coca-Cola, one of those little 12-ounce cans, I think there's about 26 grams of sugar, don't quote me, something around that ballpark figure, 26 grams of added sugar in that one can. That's it for the day. So, and that excludes fruit though. So, if you have your can of Coca-Cola, it's totally fine, but you used up your added sugar for the day. So just to give you some context. And based on research, people are getting way, way more added sugar than just that can of Coca-Cola. So anyway, I'm just trying to put that into context because when people say 10% or 6 teaspoons, I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. So I just try to break it down that way. So when we are switching out, we can try to find some other spices that can actually enhance the sweetness naturally. So think about allspice or anise or cardamom or cinnamon. In fact, 1 teaspoon of sugar is 16 calories. Even though that doesn't sound like a big number, if you're swapping out that for cinnamon, that's 0 calories and you're just really amplifying the flavor. Salt is another big one. We are crazy with our sodium, and hypertension is a big problem here in our country. And the recommendations are 1,500 milligrams per day. That's hard to do with the American diet being what it is. So what you could do is you can try to swap out if you have a taste for stuff that's, saltier, you like soda. I know a lot of people, they just love salt. I do too. I mean, I put Old Bay on almost everything. And I'm trying not to, but I just love like the spice and I love the sodium and all that stuff. But what you could do is you can try to swap out flavors that have a little bite to them. So black pepper, garlic and onion powder, curry powder, cumin, dill. We also have basil. Basil's got that little bite to it, but it's so delicious. Ginger, somebody else mentioned ginger. And the other thing I was going to say is that our taste buds do adapt. So while we might get very accustomed to the taste of salt, when we start to kind of make those cutbacks, but really play around with those flavors, our taste buds will adapt. So you won't notice it. Maybe at first you will, but eventually your taste buds adapt. So that's why it's always good to play around with the flavors that you already know and love so well. Also, heat is another good one. I know I just said that I love anything spicy, but studies do show that spice, because it has that effect on your tongue, it actually kind of helps, I guess, cover that desire for sodium. So anyway, I was just saying that, if you have more spice, you might not be craving the sodium as much, or you might not notice the sodium. So it's kind of a good thing if you are trying to cut down on the sodium. All right, so I think that's pretty much all the time I want to spend on this slide because I know we're coming up. Oh, fat. Real quick, I did want to say about the fat, and fat is a wonderful flavor enhancer. And there are some dishes where, it's just not the same. I remember my grandma, she tried to make a blueberry pie, and she's from the Midwest. So like she has her pie making skills, down to a T. She tried to make pie one time with olive oil, and it was just not the same. So anyway, we're like, Grandma, you got to use the same recipe. She's trying. So anyway, I just had to say that, some recipes are just not the same when you're trying to make some cutbacks. But I was going to say that the dietary guidelines recommend no more than 10% of our calories coming from saturated fat. Which again, some recipes you can manipulate, some you cannot. But, if you're doing a little bit of lemon juice with some fresh herbs or spices on vegetables, instead of using cheese or butter or cream-based sauces, you're saving some calories. So, or if a recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of butter and you can get away with 1, just save yourself about 100 calories from your dish. So it might not seem like much, but it really does matter. It adds up. So, we call those swap opportunities. Just make a healthier swap when you can. So I won't go through all these product recommendations, but these are some handpicked items from your very own nutritionist team at Giant. I'm really into that Bowery basil up there at that top left corner. And Bowery is our featured handpicked item of the month. And what's so cool about Bowery is they're local. So they cultivate their product in White Marsh, Maryland. So it's right here in the backyard of the DMV. And they use, they're kind of the future of agriculture. They use hydroponics. So their products are grown in water. There's no soil, there's no pesticides, which is really cool. So you can actually literally eat that right out the box. You don't have to wash it or anything. So because of, land issues and resources and all that kind of stuff, like I said, they're kind of being a little more innovative and they're cultivating their product indoors using just water. So if you have not tried Bowery, oh my goodness, I highly recommend that you do, because I'm on such a basil kick. I love making homemade margarita pizzas. I also love, the caprese. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about, with the tomato, the mozzarella, and the basil all in one bite. And sometimes I put them on a little kebab. with a little olive oil, a little balsamic. It's absolutely amazing. But yeah, they actually have a very, very tender leaf. So sometimes salads, while I like salads, and maybe some people like the crunch, but sometimes it's just a lot of roughage. So I like very soft, tender leaves. And so Bowery knocks it out the park. So next time if you're at Giant and you're curious, you want to try something new, we highly, highly recommend Bowery. And they do come with a tiny bit more of a price tag, just because, when you compare their bagged lettuce to other bagged lettuce, it can be a little pricier, but it's just because of, the hydroponics and all that good stuff. Oh yeah, somebody else is doing the homemade pizza thing. I know it saves a lot of money too when you just make your own at home, do delivery. So anyway, glad we're all on the same page. So real quick, I did want to show you before we go into Q&A, and if you can't see my screen, throw it in the chat box. But I'm really into local, and Giant has this whole local, shelf tag where they're calling out local products. I mentioned Bowery is local, but I just want to show you some of my favorites. I don't know if anyone can see this, but Shenandoah Spice Company. You'd find this in the spice aisle. And let me know if you cannot see it because I'm trying to hold it up to my camera, but I can't see myself. So anyway, they have this cool bread dip, which is really cool. So you're going to mix this in with some olive oil and some bread, maybe some whole grain bread. I think this would just be so nice for, a little appetizer, maybe a little, do a fruit and cheese spread with a little bit of bread and this bread dip here that you have. Shenandoah Spice Company, obviously they're local, Shenandoah. And they've also got other rubs for, if you're making ribs or, steaks or chicken or something. I think they have a jerk chicken rub too. So I don't know if I have any jerk chicken lovers out there, but anyway, it's just cool to support locals. So next time you're at the store, be on the lookout for Shenandoah Spice Company. And then this is also another local company, Tessie May's. They're found in the Nature's Promise section. I don't know if anyone can see this one, but it's a marinade. It's also a dressing too. So we were talking about produce, with all the local produce that we have. And if you're somebody where you're like, well, I want to jazz up the flavor, this is pretty cool. It's local, so you're supporting that. And then also you're just getting in some extra spices. I believe that this only has, well, it's made with sunflower oil, lemon juice, black pepper, mustard, and sea salt and garlic powder. So again, all the stuff that we were talking today, and it's just gonna really boost. I'm sorry, I'm wiping my hands because I think I picked up one that's got a little extra oil on the front of it. But anyway, so just want to show you some products that I'm really into. I could be here all night, but we're almost out of time. And I'm sorry I got so chatty, but just want to say real fast how you can reach us. And I will be sending a follow-up email with some supporting documents, including this deck that we went through. We have other classes available that you can go to our website and sign up for. They're on constant rotation. So if you miss a week, guess what? They'll be there next week. So they're not going away anytime soon. We also have our Healthy Living by Facebook, our Giant Facebook page. It's Healthy Living by Giant, and that's where we do show more products. I'm really into products, so I just showed you two, but there's so many others. We're talking about different ways to use Bowery products because that's our handpicked item. So Facebook is just a fun way to stay interactive with us. We do polls, we do stuff like that. You get to meet other members of the nutritionist team. So if you're on Facebook, which I think most of you are, go ahead and like our page today. And with that being said, I'm so sorry I finished right at 7 on the dot, but I'm going to stop my share. And does anybody have, I did try to, make sure I was kind of interacting with the chat as they were coming in. Does anybody have any questions? Now's the time to ask because we'll open up the floor, but I did appreciate the interaction that we got during the presentation. So thank you everybody for that.
And thank you, Kristen, for joining us this evening.
You're
There's
so welcome.
A lot of great information. It doesn't look like anybody's putting anything in the chat, so we're just going to have a few announcements. Thank you guys for joining us for today. Before we leave, we just want to give you a couple announcements. So we want your feedback, so be on the lookout for an email with a link to complete a survey for a chance to win an Amazon gift card. If you would like to have the recording of this program, please send us an email at wellness@pgparks.com. And we hope that you guys can join us for our next virtual nutrition workshop, which will be on Thursday, July 29th from 6 to 7 p.m. And with that, we will conclude our program with a video. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the virtual nutrition workshop. For more videos to help you make healthier choices, Visit the Department of Parks and Recreation's online resource center at pgparks.com. Until next time, be healthy, be well.